I believe Miss Mogherini's just come in. Is that
Yes,
can you
yes.
hear
Hi,
everything going on?
I can. Hi.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute honor to have you here today. Welcome to Homerton Politics. Um, we've got a lot of people here that are very interested to hear what you've got to say. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. Um, I suppose I'll start off by saying I suppose what inspired you to pursue a career in politics, and particularly what made you want to pursue foreign affairs and international politics in particular? So is there any sort of early inspiration in your life that sort of made you want to take that career path forward?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. It's yes, actually, I never decided to do. I never decided to become a minister. I never decided to become a high representative. I never decided. I mean, I never planned. I never even dreamt of doing that. But I was always interested in foreign policy. I was always interested in the rest of the world. And I knew from a very early age that this would have been what I wanted to do. So the idea was to, yes, first I wanted to actually be a journalist or work in the UN system or NGOs, something related to the world. And probably, so I'm talking about when I was probably in high school, and that was the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And those were years where indeed the world was changing very rapidly and in a positive direction. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the beginning of what we were calling the globalization. So there was a lot of enthusiasm in the possibility of shaping how the world would have looked like after the Cold War. And so for me, that was the main trigger, the main push for dealing with that. I understand it's very different. Situation than you face today, but it was out of enthusiasm more than out of preoccupation, I would say.
Okay, lovely. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the Cold War and everything and the sort of political context of the time. Speaking of such, I mean, has there been any particularly significant influences from, I mean, so it's earlier in your life or earlier in your career that have shaped your views on international politics, sort of your own opinions? I mean, what were the main sources of inspiration for your own beliefs? I mean, I know you used to be a member of the Italian Communist Youth Federation, and then you've also served in the centre-left
Actually,
cabinet.
in the Communist Youth Organization, yes, this is reported sometimes on social media or on Wikipedia. Actually, I was not really too much in time for that because
Okay.
I was born in 73, and if I don't remember wrong, the Italian Communist Party was dissolved, if I'm not wrong, around 92, I think, something like that. So I was not really in time for being a member. And as you know, the Italian Communist Party, even in the 80s and the 70s, was very different from others, namely on its position on NATO and on the Soviet Union. But for me, it was not really. I mean, I think. Yeah, I think I am active in politics slightly in parallel with the dissolution or the transformation of the Communist Party in Italy. So I was never a member actually of the party, but I was active in politics, mainly in the student movement. I started with the student movement. I started being a student rep in high school. And at that time, yes, the main sources of information for me were mainly, well, at the time, the newspapers, written newspapers. I mean, obviously there were no digital versions. And I was trying to read everything I could about international relations and international dynamics. I remember something that now might make you smile and makes me smile. When I was, yes, 15, 16, 17 years old, I had folders, colored folders, and every color was linked to different areas of the world. And I was cutting all the articles in the newspapers that I was interested in and collecting all the articles in these folders. And my mom was very mad with me because I had folders and pieces of newspapers. I was trying to read one or two newspapers every day fully already when I was in high school. So basically, it was reading and newspapers at the time. I was very young, and then as I was growing up, it was mainly I was becoming active in the in the very early 90s in a civil society organization, in an NGO. That was the biggest Italian civil society organization, and I was mainly working on anti-racist activities. And those were the years where Italy started to be a country of immigration rather than emigration. It was new for us. Italians always had left Italy to work abroad, and for the first time we were receiving immigrants. It was not an easy change for the Italian society, and I was starting to work on that. So with the fact that I was speaking English and French, it was easy for me also to work on the ground. And this network of civil society organizations, also at European level, I was connecting with SOS Racism, with other organizations, including in the UK. Those became my main sources of inspiration and information. The first networks I had on international level were through, civil society organizations, and then the youth center of the Council of Europe. In 93, 94, I was very active with the European youth centers in Strasbourg and in Budapest. And I was running with the Council of Europe the All Different, All Equal campaign that was about anti-racism and diversity and inclusion, we would say today. These were years where I was very active in this network of organizations that was working on that. So it was, yes, 93, 94.
Okay, lovely. That's very interesting. It's funny you mentioned sort of anti-racism and your work on that in particular. And I suppose talking more broadly about the EU, I mean, you were obviously High Representative, which is, I mean, very impressive. It's an honour to have you here today, to be honest. So when you were, High Representative in all of your roles in the EU, obviously there was the migrant crisis in 2015. It's been a huge political issue of our day. And I was just wondering, what do you think the future holds within the European Union for following that migrant crisis? I mean, obviously, I appreciate none of us have a crystal ball of types. None of us can sort of completely predict. But I mean, I understand you're director of the European Diplomatic Academy, so sort of training the next generation and sort of looking at what the new generation of diplomats might sort of be looking to do. So I was just wondering, what's the sort of insight on that? Where do you think the EU should sort of take migration and global issues such as that in the future? What do you see happening in the future?
Well, first of all, we always refer to the migration crisis or the refugee crisis from a European perspective. I've always been convinced that actually the crisis is not a European crisis. Those that are facing the crisis are the migrants and the refugees, not us that are on the other side. And also, I think that it's difficult to predict what will happen and how things will find their way on this file in the future in the European Union. I would say in Europe, actually, because I mean it's an issue that is very relevant across Europe, regardless of its of the European Union borders. It's not because the UK is not a member of the European Union anymore that it is not an issue there, or other countries. It's difficult for me to predict how this file will be handled or will find its solution in the European Union. What I can tell you is what I believe would be good for that to happen, what we would see as a development. And I think that it would be I'm not necessarily thinking that this will happen, I have to say. I think that we have a reality check problem on this file. I think we are not realizing at full how much we need migration in Europe for economic reasons, graphic reasons, for the sustainability of our welfare system, our pension system. I mean, but also for the sustainability of some sectors of our economy that would simply collapse in the absence of qualified and regular migration flows. So I think that this is a starting point. I think that we are really focusing very much on the political discourse around migration and not capturing the reality of the phenomenon and as it is, and how much we need it actually. I always wish that we had an academic study on the costs of non-migration. What would happen to our societies and our economies in case we had to face major downgrades in terms of numbers of people coming in. And I also think that one of the main problems we're facing in Europe, not only in the European Union, is the fact that it is far too difficult to enter any European country in a regular manner. We don't have enough channels for regular migration. I think this is somehow also contributing to increasing the number of people that try to come in an irregular manner, because it is extremely difficult, if not impossible sometimes, to find a regular manner to join our continent, which is counterproductive for us. So this is the starting point. Then on the management of the flows, I think we sometimes are not too clear on the difference between the refugee flows and the migratory flows. It's two completely different channels, two completely different legal frameworks. When we talk about refugees, obviously you need to trust the UN agencies and you need to trust international law. And the asylum procedures are clear and need to be, I think, respected by those like Europeans that always consider that rule of law and international law need to be respected. So I think we should simply follow the rules and honor our commitments. And this requires an element of solidarity within the European Union. I think ideally across Europe, but at least within the European Union, because clearly if somebody has a refugee status, they are entitled to protection. And this should happen, I believe, in a way that makes it sustainable for the countries that are hosting the refugees. When it comes to migratory flows, it's a different issue. Again, I said, I think that the main point here would be to create effective functioning channels for regular migration. And the other thing that is essential is having effective ways to partner with the countries of origin and transit. And during my mandate, we concluded some very important agreements I was very proud of with the countries of origin and transit and with the UNHCR and the IOM, regulate in a triangular manner EU, UN agencies, and countries of origin and transit a sustainable and respectful way of handling the migratory flows.
Okay,
but I'm not sure any of these elements will enter the main stream of the political considerations on migration in the European Union in the near future. It's very sensitive politically, and this is very sad to me.
Yes, yeah. Like I suppose off the back of that, actually, I mean, I suppose you mentioned earlier about your work on anti-racism and, sort of fighting that sort of rhetoric. Obviously, an issue like immigration is often linked, unfortunately, with a lot of racism from many. How does it make you feel when you see sort of, I mean, there's a rise of far-right parties throughout Europe, I suppose, that are sort of hammering down on immigration as a huge issue. What do you think my generation in particular can do to sort of help resolve that problem? Because, I mean, we've got to start fighting these racist attitudes from somewhere. And like you say, people need to be more informed on, how good immigration is for economies and how important it actually is. So what do you think the next generation can do to sort of help combat that, whether that be in a European context, in the EU, or more widely? Like, how do you see sort of this improving?
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having used the right words, Sophia. You really did well. I'm very happy about that because I'm not a professor, I'm not an academic, but still I'm starting to get a little bit of that. No, because you used the right words. You said racism, and yes, indeed, we have a problem of racism in Europe. not only in Europe. I think in America we have probably even more worrying one. But sometimes we hide this term and we avoid referring to it as it is. Well, I think we need to use the right words. This is a starting point to recognize what you have in front of you. And I think this is the awareness element is the most important thing. We have racism in our societies. And this is what we need to fight. And also, you use the right word when you refer to the right, extreme right-wing movements and parties gaining space and representation in our institutions. And here again, thank you for using the right words, because sometimes we refer to generic populist movements or anti-system movements. We also have that, but we also have extreme right-wing parties that are gaining consensus and space. And I think that we have to call things with their names. And in Europe, we have a history that should be hopefully enough to warn us from the dangers of this. What could you do? What can you do? What kind of responsibility you have? Well, I think you can do many things. I would focus on two, and I have a lot of hope on your generation. I think you can definitely do better than ours and the previous ones, and especially those of you that have the possibility to study and that have the possibility to understand how your own societies and the rest of the world work for real. The first one is on a very personal, private, and daily basis. Racism, as well as the public discourse of extreme right movements, often gain grounds in environments that have very little to do with politics. It can be at school, it can be at the gym, it can be on the bus, on the tube, supermarket. The chit chats that you have every day, and just a simple comment, just a sentence, just a word, sometimes have this snowball effect of spreading into society a certain perception of things. And this is very dangerous when things in society, without any clear and open political connotation, start to become normal or start to be perceived as being normal. Elements of discrimination, and what worries me is not only racism, but also discrimination towards minorities of all kinds, gender-based discriminations and violence against women and discrimination against women. Still, we have that so much in our societies, and you can do a lot just with your simple daily behavior, in your connection with your people around, your friends, your neighbors, your family, again, even strangers, because a lot of that goes through language and personal behaviors. If you say something that you think is not wrong, just speak up, just intervene, get out there and show solidarity or show the right understanding of how interpersonal relations should work in a society. This is already a way of contributing. And then the second element, so you have a personal responsibility in your everyday life. Exercise respect and understanding and intercultural build up. This is building the foundation. And the second thing is also quite self-evident. Vote. Go out and vote. Because it is, I know that for many, it's difficult to find your perfect match. You're not satisfied with a party. You will never be satisfied with 100% satisfied with a party. But don't think that your vote is not relevant. Your vote is relevant. Every single vote is relevant. And if you don't vote, you let others decide for you. And then you can't complain about, and I think, again, in the UK, you have a recent history that teaches you this. Every single vote counts, and this is a very powerful way of contributing to a different kind of society and world.
Yeah, no, it's really important. It's particularly important how you touch on sort of democratic, like the importance of democracy and everybody participating in that, because we've got an opportunity, we need to use it. And sort of like, speaking of that, actually, I mean, there's a few scholars that comment, and a few different commentators that comment that the EU has a slight democratic deficit, with a lot of people within like a lot of people living within countries of member states not feeling connected to EU politics. And I mean, I suppose first of all, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you agree with that statement? Like, do you not? I don't know.
Not at all, not at all. You know, I think that European institutions are probably the institutions in the world that have the largest democratic legitimacy. If you consider that, well, take my role, for instance, the role I used to have, the one that Catherine Ashton had before me, and that now Borrell has. You take the High Representative and Vice President of the Commission, the HRVP. In my case, I was, every HRVP is voted by the European Parliament, that is directly elected by the European citizens. And not only that, but also by the European Council, which is the heads of state and government of the 27, at my time 28, member states, democratically elected. So if nobody has problems with the democratic deficit of a prime minister, if that prime minister votes together with other prime ministers for the EU leadership, as it happens for the Commission, for the European Council indicating the President of the Commission, for instance, and then it goes to the vote of the European Parliament, there is a double level of legitimacy somehow, of democratic legitimacy. The one that comes from governments that are at their time elected, democratically elected, and the one that comes from the European Parliament that is directly elected by the people. So you have somehow a double level of democratic legitimacy, the governments and the European Parliament that is elected directly by the people. The reason why there is it, so the democratic deficit is non-existent, and if it exists, then we should question the democratic deficits we have in our member states. That would be much more relevant. And I don't believe we have a real democratic deficit in our member states. I think our democracies are strong, at least formally. Then sometimes substantially we have some shortcomings. If there is a sense of disconnect, if there is a feeling of disconnect, I think it is because sometimes there is an element of miscommunication about the connection between the national decision-making procedures and the European ones. Very often, national leaderships blame anything that doesn't go well on Brussels. The only ones that cannot play this game are the Belgians, but on the European Union, let's put it this way. And actually, the European Union doesn't exist without the member states. So the European decisions are the result of the decisions that all member states together take, normally at unanimity. So I think there is a responsibility for national leaderships here, national politicians, national ministries and ministers and prime ministers, that instead of saying the European Union has decided, should say, we have decided in the European Union, because the national decisions get together to form the European decisions. And I think that this distance that citizens feel is the result of probably, in most cases, an intentional miscommunication from the national leaderships that find an easy scapegoat in the European Union sometimes to I understand that, but I think it's detrimental for the attachment of the European citizens to the European project.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I suppose 2019 election in Britain says a lot about that, and maybe
a bit.
and depending on your opinions on things, you know, whether there was a miscommunication there or not. But yes, no, I certainly know what you mean. There's a lot of responsibility on national leaders for sure. Do you think that the way forward is sort of improving the education that people get on the European Union and actually understanding how it works and how it functions? Because, I mean, I've spoken to a few people that are quite confused about how everything works. But do you think that if people actually understood, and if there was sort of an education campaign, you know, sort of around, you know, people being educated around the EU on a deeper level, do you think people would be more actively involved? Because, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people who feel detached from EU politics because they are confused, not out of any, a lot of the times it's not out of, you know, sort of an active dislike, it's more out of confusion. So do you think that the way forward is an education campaign to sort of make people aware?
Yes, I think that I have two daughters, and they've gone to school. One of them, at least, at first in Italy, and then to the European school in Brussels. And I've realized that in the European school in Brussels, first of all, the fact of having European students around you makes you understand what is it to be European, because you're not only Italian or French or Spanish or Dutch or Estonian, but you are European, so there is a common identity. But obviously, you cannot replicate that everywhere in Europe. That wouldn't be possible. But what I like the most is that there is a curriculum that reflects the European Union history and dimension much more. So I found out that in European schools, my daughters don't follow a curriculum that is a purely national one. They study European history, and they study, including studying some subjects in English or in French or in German, whatever language you choose. So, but the angle through which you study your subjects is a European one and not a purely national one. And there are European hours where they learn about the history of the European integration process and the way in which the European Union functions and who does what. And obviously it's very complex, but they started this with primary schools. And I think it would be great to have this kind of approach in every member state. Obviously, education is a competence for countries, for member states, not a European competence. So it would be in itself difficult to have this as a European démarche. But I think it would be great to have all over Europe education to the European integration process from the primary schools or European hours that can start from that age when you're 5, 6 years old to perceive yourself as a European, not only as a national, and to understand what is the history and the developments of your continent.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned the sort of European versus national identity sort of divide. I mean, how do you perceive that divide? Because I mean, what's your opinion on sort of national identity? Because I mean, certainly in Britain, I mean, that was for many, not for all, but for many, that was a lot of the reason for Brexit. Do you think that, for example, if British citizens would have thought themselves as more European, and like you say, having this integrated curriculum, that maybe there would be a better sense of togetherness and therefore like a more of a tendency to stick with the EU? Like, do you think that's sort of the future of securing like the EU in general and all of the member states?
First of all, I'm not worried about the future of the European Union, and I'll be very candid on that, because after Brexit, I think nobody wants to go there. So I think if there is one thing we have learned is the deterrent effect of Brexit. Many people might talk about this, but I don't think that anybody is seriously planning to get out of the European Union, because if even the UK is not in a good place after Brexit, imagine any other country. I mean, the UK moved from being perceived and also being somehow extremely stable and prosperous and predictable. You're in a different place now, and I think that all other member states now would definitely not consider going down that way, down that road anymore. So I'm not worried that others are actually planning to leave the European Union after what they've seen happening with the UK. So in one sense, this has had a positive deterrent effect on the others. It's not a consolation, but it's a reality of fact. And I don't think that there is actually an issue between national and European identity. Why should there be? I mean, there is a tension between national identity and European identity only if this is politically installed somehow. This is politically nurtured. If there is a political discourse in the public sphere that contraposes the national identity and the European identity. Exactly as there is a problem between regional or city identity versus regional or national identity, only if it is politically used. But otherwise, I'm from Rome, and I'm Roman, and I have a strong Roman identity, and I come from a city that was I couldn't say the first empire because we're not the first, but for sure one of the largest and stronger ones, coming all the way up to the UK and beyond. I feel proud, a proud citizen of Rome. I feel a proud Roman. I feel a proud Italian, and I feel a proud European. And the three elements, the three dimensions, are not at all in contradiction. I don't feel a particular attachment to my regional identity, but others do. And you can have a multiple layer of identities, one not contradicting the other at all, because they are at a different level. The only time when they become a problem and they are perceived as being in contradiction one to the other is when there is a political use of them. But in natural terms, I don't see the contradiction at all, because again, they just build up your identity. It was as if I had to say, I see a contradiction between, I don't know, being a woman and being from Rome. Why should that be? You have different angles and different layers of your identity, and they are perfectly compatible one with the other.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Sort of speaking more widely about the EU in general, and sort of the future, how do you think the EU can work more effectively in the future to combat, I mean, I suppose not just European crises, it doesn't have to be just European, but global crises such as, I mean, international conflict and climate change, because, I mean, international conflict is always a huge issue, and so is climate change. Like, do you believe the EU can really have a positive impact on those things and sort of build faith in international institutions even further? Do you think that there is a role for the EU in that in the future?
Yes, there is already in the present, and there has been in the past. I think that, you know, the European Union history is somehow our DNA, and it's the reason why, I mean, we are a multilateral organization by definition. We were born, by the way, I'm very proud now to serve the College of Europe that was born even before the European institution started in 49. We were born exactly to bet on a different perspective. I mean, after having killed each other for thousands of years, we were saying, okay, very visionary leadership was somehow saying, we invest in cooperation and a multilateral approach, because we might find out that this is more convenient than making war. We might gain more out of cooperation than out of conflict. So I think, I mean, these are the roots of the European project. And I think that this is why the European Union will always be somehow a beacon of hope for the credibility, the legitimacy, the efficiency of the international organizations and the multilateral system. Today, we live in a situation where you have a multilateral system that is extremely discredited, especially after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, coming from a permanent member of the Security Council. This clearly has shaken the remaining credibility and functioning of the institution. In the moment, so we have somehow the credibility and efficiency of the effectiveness of the multilateral institutions at their lowest point, in the moment when, as you rightly said, the problems we're facing, and in particular the climate change, but also the wars around us, would require the strongest role for the multilateral organizations. In this, I think that the European Union will be absolutely the center of gravity in the future, around which the international debate about how do we revitalize, how we rethink, maybe how do we refound the international organizations will happen and will start. At a certain moment, we will need to do that. But already now, sometimes I suggest to my students, to our students here, one exercise, and try to imagine that. Try to imagine for 24 hours, just 24 hours, that the European Union didn't exist. Take away everything that the European Union does. Create a world vision where for 24 hours, there's no European Union. Take away the humanitarian aid, take away the development cooperation, take away the political and diplomatic work, take away all the projects on connectivity, digital infrastructures, rule of law, reforms, judiciary, everything, support to the civil society. For 24 hours, you do like this, and all that the European Union is doing around the world, the support to the UN agencies, everything disappears for 24 hours. Imagine that scenario, and I can tell you, most probably in 24 hours, many different situations in the world would collapse, and many others would be, just in 24 hours, in a much worse place than they are today, and they're not in a good place today. Just think of Ukraine. I mean, what the European Union has done, obviously in cooperation with member states, but also the coordination that the European Union does with member states is a relevant part in fostering the member states' level of contribution. So already today, without the European Union, the world would be in a much, much worse place.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Russia, Ukraine, which is obviously very current and very important. I mean, I believe it was your first press conference as EU High Representative. You actually declared that efforts will be devoted to establishing discussions between the two countries to sort of solve the crisis, which was a long time ago. Like, are you surprised by how the situation has played out today? And in light of that, like, what do you think, in your opinion, should the European Union do about the situation in Russia, Ukraine? I suppose many years on from when you started, how did you A, see this coming, and B, what do you think should be done about it in the future?
It is correct to say that the conflict has exacerbated and escalated 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, but actually it started in its very first forms in 2014, indeed. I was at the time actually Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, so not even a high representative when it really started with the annexation of Crimea and the first activities of Russia in Ukrainian territory. I mean, not officially, but clearly through proxies and paramilitaries. So I saw it coming. I'm not surprised. I think that this has been building up for years. We had at the beginning in 2014. Again, I was not a representative at the time, so my responsibility was limited to one country only, not 28. But at first, I think it was quite important to explore all different possibilities. Sanctions were imposed immediately. But I think that my predecessor, Catherine Ashton, had a reason to keep the channels of communication open at that time in 2014, to try to see if there were some possibilities to avoid an escalation. Every time that a conflict starts or a crisis starts, the first thing you have to do is to try and understand if you can stop the escalation and you can try to prevent this from becoming something even more serious. So I think it was correct to do that, but it was quite clear then that even the agreements that were achieved in 2015, the Minsk agreements were not implemented properly, and that an escalation of this kind could have been possible. What should be done now, how the European Union should react now? I think that the European Union has reacted very well now. I was very proud to see the combination of support measures and of sanctions that the European Union has put in place in record time. Sometimes almost always the European Union is perceived as being slow, it's being divided, it's being not relevant. And this is a perfect case. Also with COVID. COVID also was a situation where I think the European Union reacted very well, fast, united, and in a very relevant manner. But in front of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the European Union has managed to be united, to act very fast, and to be very relevant. Because if you consider what the European Union has put together for Ukraine, an impressive list of sanctions against Russia, unthinkable, a complete revision of the energy policy in all European countries. You remember last year, in these times, I mean, even before, in October last year, we were afraid that we wouldn't have managed the winter for the energy crisis. and we've managed in a few months to reconvert the entire energy policy of the Union. So something extremely difficult to put in place. The financial support to Ukraine, that is massive from the European Union and member states. The military support, again, breaking a taboo. For the first time, the European Union is delivering large amounts of military support with an instrument that we created during my mandate, the European Peace Facility, and that has turned to be very flexible and that has managed to deliver indeed military support and the political support. I mean, to be honest, I think that one of the most relevant deterrent elements for the future to try to secure Ukraine, its territorial integrity, its capacity to be a democracy and to be fully in control of its own destiny, is the perspective of membership to the European Union. Offering that perspective is one of the strongest acts that the European Union can do. So I think that the reaction that the European Union had to the war that Russia started against Ukraine has been good and precious, and I'm quite confident that it will continue. I mean, it's difficult, and every time that you need to take a decision altogether, you will always hear voices that are critical, that are measuring how much does this impact their own economy or their own particular policies. But at the end of the day, the decisions are taken. So I'm not worried about expressions of difficulties. I'm confident that as decisions have been taken so far, they will continue to be taken. I think.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. And sort of on the topic of international conflict, nuclear control has been a huge part of your career, and you are praised a lot for your role in negotiating the Iran nuclear deal, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And I was just wondering, what do you think that the future holds for sort of the containing of nuclear weapons, because it's such a complex issue, and it's an issue that gravely threats the world today. I mean, we're living in a world where we're constantly scared one country is going to sort of push the big red button and start a nuclear war. What do you think? I mean, is the Iran nuclear deal, things like that, just the start? How do you envisage the future of sort of the containment of nuclear weapons? I know it's a difficult one because it's such a complicated.
The $1 million question. Yeah. This is the most difficult question.
Yeah, no.
I don't know, and I wish I knew, and if I knew, I would definitely be probably solving many issues and many problems in our future. I think nobody really knows how this will develop, and especially nobody knows how to prevent a nuclear crisis and to restart, I would say, or to re-energize the nuclear non-proliferation agenda. That was indeed looking very promising in 2015. We had around 2015, I would say, it was also a very strong part of the Obama administration agenda, and personally of Obama as a president. You might remember Obama in his very early months, I think, of his administration, delivered an impressive speech on nuclear non-proliferation. I think it was in Germany, or it was in Europe, maybe in Prague. I think it was in Prague, defining his vision of his own work on nuclear non-proliferation and potentially even going towards arms reduction and arms control. That was very powerful. And if I'm not wrong, John Kerry at the time was the first Secretary of State, and I think the only one, but on that I'm not sure, but for sure the first Secretary of State visiting Hiroshima in Japan and apologizing. So that was an administration that had a strong agenda on nuclear non-proliferation, and that was combined with a very strong push given by the successfully concluded negotiations on the Iran nuclear deal. And in general terms, the impression that, but also the conclusions of the START treaty, the impression that the nuclear the arms control architecture and the nuclear non-proliferation agenda was one fundamental pillar of the multilateral governance and architecture. Today, that architecture is collapsing, and the nuclear one is collapsing with it. So the question about the the nuclear agenda is connected with the effectiveness and the legitimacy of the multilateral international institutions to me. It's an entire system that is losing ground, is losing effectiveness, and is losing legitimacy. And the nuclear pillar of it is too, and this is extremely dangerous. Is there a way to restart the engine of arms control and nuclear non-proliferation, even while the international global governance system is suffering? I'm not sure about that. I hope there is. I'm not sure about that. But clearly, we are in a very different place from where we were in 2015-16. And this is really one, probably together with climate change, I think this is the most scary thing we are living today.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I suppose the Iran nuclear deal, though, must have been a proud moment for you, though, because I mean, you know, you're managing to make some tangible change in this area. I mean, albeit the nuclear weapons situation is very, very complex. It still must have been a very proud achievement for you. And I could be right in saying it took about 12 years to negotiate. Was it long, long time?
Very long time.
I mean, I assume it was very frustrating when you have international actors such as Donald Trump trying to withdraw from the agreement and sort of reimpose sanctions, things like that. How do you deal with that? Because it's been in the work for 12 years.
You have to have a good character and work on that first. One thing that I always tell also our students here is that if you're looking into anything that has to do with diplomacy and public role, you have to work a lot on your capacity to handle frustration, to create a space between what you're doing and who you are as a person. And again, if I can give a little bit of advice, work on your personal capacity to hold and still sleep at night and eat properly and have your life, even if you don't have a life, but pretend at least you have a life and smile, even if some things around you are collapsing. Don't take it personal and try to put some distance. You need to be able to let go a couple of things from a personal point of view if you want to maintain a certain sanity, I would say. But apart from that, the nuclear deal with Iran was a major, major, major success. It was a major achievement. I came in only for the last year, and I was able to build on everything that all my predecessors had done, starting with Solana and then Catherine Ashton. But actually, the very, very first one that started was Joschka Fischer from his position as a German foreign minister. It was an extraordinary experience for me to be able to conclude those negotiations, to facilitate them, and to get to achieve that result. Not only to achieve the agreement, but also, and most importantly, to achieve the full implementation of the agreement less than 1 year after that. For me, that was really amazing that we managed to fully implement everything in the agreement within 1 year after the signing of the agreement. That was really impressive. It was, I think it was a masterpiece of diplomacy. I was very proud. And then, yes, there was a certain element of frustration, especially. I mean, we were aware of the fact that Trump being elected, he would have tried to destroy the agreement. I have to say, in the overall sense of frustration, there was also an element of pride, because when you face a frustrating situation, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is it in this situation that goes beyond my control and on which I can do nothing at all, and that you just have to accept and try to contain the damage? And what is it that I actually can do? Is there something I can do? Because if you are frustrated, other people would be frustrated, and it means that there is, in general terms, a negative situation coming up for some, at least. So what can I do to change that? And that was an angle under which I was very proud, because actually we managed for 2-3 years, we managed to save the agreement. Thanks to the unity of the European Union, even together with China and Russia and Iran, which was quite extraordinary in that context when we were, yes, clearly disagreeing strongly on many other files, including Ukraine, but also on Syria, on Libya. And things with Russia were not easy, and with China either, and with Iran either, on human rights and regional dynamics. But on that particular fight, we managed to ring fence that particular agreement and say, okay, Trump went out. Actually, we never said he was going out of the agreement, because technically what he did was announcing that the United States would have stopped implementing a UN Security Council resolution that the United States had voted, because the Iran nuclear deal was technically an annex to a UN Security Council resolution unanimously adopted. So, but obviously, I mean, he didn't present it this way and probably was not even aware of that. But I was very proud that we managed to save the agreement and to keep it going for a few years after that, thanks to. So the first thing is also to handle frustration, is to ask yourself, is there something I can do that can make it less terrible, awful? Can I do something good even if the situation doesn't look good? And of that, I was happy and satisfied and proud, because we managed to keep the agreement in place. What was really frustrating was the extraterritorial effect of sanctions reimposed by the United States that were making it impossible for the European companies and businesses and banks, not only Europeans, but also others, to properly engage with Iran. We tried with different instruments. We tried to be very creative. We tried to overcome this, but it was, at the end of the day, a level of connection between the European and the American financial system and trade system is so deep that the extraterritorial effect of the US sanctions made it somehow impossible for us to deliver on commitments that we wanted to honor, and that we were impossible to be honored because of the US nature of the nature of the sanctions of the United States. That was frustrating.
Yeah, no, I can very much imagine, but it's still a fantastic achievement. Really fantastic achievement. I'm very aware of time. So I believe I want to give the audience opportunity to ask you some questions as well. So I'll temporarily shut up and ask the audience if they have any questions for you. So if anybody has a question, just feel free to unmute your mic and go ahead, go for it. Oh, we've got one in the chat. Hold on, let me get the chat open. Okay, so we've had a question. I'll read it out. Federica, it's been a privilege to hear from you. Thank you for your time. You said that you have hope in our generation. Do you have any advice for young people aspiring to contribute to positive change on a global scale?
Yes, study. This is also why I'm here. I mean, I would have never imagined that I would have continued as a rector of the College of Europe, but for me, this is a way of empowering young people to be able to create that change. And studying is the way to create empowerment. You need to know what you care about. You need to know how the world works or doesn't work. You need to study. I mean, for me, the most empowering element has always been being on top of my files and knowing one thing more than the person in front of me with which I wanted to win an argument, and so knowledge is really power. And my advice is to get the best of not only the knowledge that you can acquire by, obviously, I mean, your academic parcours is very important, and but what I find the most important kind of knowledge is the critical one. Challenge what you learn. I mean, learning is an extraordinary tool to constantly challenge what you are learning. Don't give it for granted. Be also open to not only to challenge what you're learning, but also to bring into the conversation your own thoughts and your own proposals or ideas. Sometimes what I see in the younger generations is a sort of being not sure if it is shy or not confident enough to bring into the picture what you believe might be interesting or right. I've worked with many talented young people in my life, and what I've appreciated the most always was when they were coming up with ideas that were sometimes unconventional. And many of them were maybe having great ideas, but were refraining from saying that because they thought, okay, but probably if this has never been said or done, there is a good reason for that. So I'll better shut up and just use the common languages, use it, and sometimes even repeating the jargon that is cause of use. No, the more you study, the more you know, the more you are empowered by your knowledge, the more you have the responsibility and the possibility to test your own ideas, to try and raise proposals, wherever you will be in your professional career. Take the risk, or also take the responsibility to put on the table your own contribution. And this is something you can do only if you know well what you're talking about. Otherwise, you wouldn't dare, or probably you would dare, but you would say something that doesn't really fit. So study hard, get the best knowledge you can, and then put forward your own ideas on the basis of the knowledge you have, and apply always a critical approach to whatever you learn.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. We have one more question. Again, I'll read it out to you. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. It's been an absolute privilege to hear you speak. And what I'd like to ask is, given the quantity of numerous and varied roles you've held, which one have you found the most politically fulfilling, i.e. which one have you felt like you were most able to achieve your objectives with?
Apart from the current one, no, but I have to say that I love being at the College of Europe, and I wished I had a little bit more time to tell you a bit about what we're doing here. I'm very excited because, yes, you hinted, Sophia, the fact that we started the Diplomatic Academy last year, which is an exciting project for me. And we are now in the process of opening a third campus of the College of Europe in Tirana in Albania, which is historical. So I'm very excited about what I'm doing here. And actually, my temptation would be to answer this one, but probably I'm an enthusiast. I'm an optimist and an enthusiast. So probably in every step of my career, I would have told you the current role is the one I like most, simply because I love what I do and I enjoy what I'm doing always, which is another trick I can share with you. Try to always do what you like to do, and because you do it better, and it shows. And it's less heavy when it's November and it's cold and dark, and you have to wake up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning to do your job. But probably if I try to have a step back and not to answer instinctively, being director of the College of Europe, I would probably say being the High Representative and Vice President of the European Commission. This has clearly been, even if many people were telling me, why are you doing this? You know, you're a foreign minister of a G7 country. National institutions are more powerful than European ones. No, I would never agree with that. I never felt, apart from, again, on little scale here at the college, but I never felt as much in power as when I was in the European position as an HRVP. And power is not a bad word. Power means that you have the power to change things, you have the power to initiate things, you have the power to decide, you have the power to have an impact, which comes with the responsibility. But I felt that we're really having an impact. And whatever we were doing, nothing excluded, whatever we were doing, it was relevant. Every single thing, even a word, even a comma, even a statement, even a visit, everything had a meaning, everything had a weight, everything had importance. So I would say that probably politically the most fulfilling one was that one. It was also super intense because, as you probably know, the role of the HRBP is 3 or 4 roles in one. So it's like living several lives every day. It's extremely intense. Probably you cannot do it more than 5 years, but I loved it. It was amazing. It was amazing, but I was also happy to finish at a certain moment. But I loved it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. I'll just quickly check the chat, see if we've got any more questions before we wrap up.
Yeah.
No, I think that's it actually.
That's great. I really enjoyed. Thank you very much for organizing this and for a very nice conversation. And I wish you all the best for your studies. And who knows, maybe I'll see some of you at the college one day.
Thank you so much. It's honestly been a privilege to talk to you on behalf of myself, the Politics Society, and everyone here. Yeah, thank you very much for spending time with us today and taking the time out of your day.
Very much.
Very busy. So
thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Sophia. Did a really good job.
Oh, thank you very much. I've just seen on the top of the corner, it said recording for the entire thing. I don't know if it was. Oh, it says recording on the top of my screen. Oh my gosh, it does say recording, but then I've just seen a record button at the bottom. Oh no, Daniel.
It'll be fine, don't worry. It'll be fine.
Oh no, to be fair, I'll send you a quick picture of what my screen looks like because it looks like it is, but I also didn't have to press anything. It was just like that when.
It also says recording from this side.
It says recording for me.
Oh, okay, nice. Okay, cool. No, that's fine. Just checking.
Cool.
Okay,
Right.
nice.
Well done, Sophia.
Thank you. I will end the call.
Yeah, really proud. Well done.
See you later, guys.